If you've ever stood in a majestic national park feeling one with nature, I'm here to ruin that vibe. Behind every beautiful vista is a legal minefield of bureaucracy that would make a tax auditor weep. We are breaking down 50 of the most baffling, hilarious, and downright insane rules governing the great outdoors that you won't believe actually exist. From illegal whistling to federal fruit quotas, prepare to see the wilderness through the eyes of the world's strictest hall monitor. 1. In many geothermal areas like Lassen Volcanic, there is a strictly enforced prohibition against thermal cooking. Believe it or not, people have actually been caught trying to boil hot dogs or chickens in acidic, bubbling mud pots or steam vents. This isn't just a health hazard, it's a federal crime that alters the delicate chemical balance of these rare features. Beyond the massive fine, you're looking at a dinner that tastes like sulfur and melted boot rubber. Seriously, is a volcanic poached egg really worth a court date for using the planet as your personal, illegal microwave? 2. If you find yourself in a national park and stumble upon a prehistoric arrowhead or a rusty horseshoe from the 1800s, do not, under any circumstances, put it in your pocket. Under the Archaeological Resources Protection Act, taking a single artifact, which can literally be a piece of old glass, is a federal felony. You aren't finding a souvenir, you are looting federal property. The government's stance is basically, look with your eyes, not with your hands, unless you want your next camping trip to be in a windowless cell with a roommate named Tiny. 3. Did you know that in certain wilderness areas, you are legally required to carry out your own solid human waste? I'm not talking about digging a hole, I'm talking about pack-it-out bags, affectionately known as wag bags. You essentially have to gift wrap your own business and hike for 3 days with it, dangling from your backpack like a cursed keychain. It brings a whole new meaning to the phrase, taking your work home with you. Seriously, how much do you have to love hiking to carry a bag of your own shame across a mountain range? 4. At the Grand Canyon, there is a very specific and stern rule against throwing anything over the edge, including biodegradable items like apple cores or banana peels. You might think you're returning nutrients to the earth, but in reality, you're creating a lethal projectile that could clock a mule on a lower trail or lure a rare California condor into a dangerous diving maneuver for a snack. Plus, a tossed coin reaches terminal velocity pretty quickly. If you want to throw money away, just stay at the park lodge and look at the minibar prices instead. 5. In many national parks, it is technically illegal to survive too successfully if it involves building a semi-permanent shelter. If you get lost and build a cozy debris hut or a lean-to, you're a hero. But the moment you start adding aesthetic touches or staying there longer than a few nights, you're violating federal laws against unauthorized structures. People have actually been fined for building primitive cabins that were too good. The government's logic is that if you build it, you're homesteading. So if you're lost, keep it ugly. Otherwise, the rangers will charge you with illegal architecture while you're waiting to be rescued. 6. If you're planning on getting married in a national park, you better have a permit for those rose petals. Many parks strictly forbid throwing flower petals, rice, or birdseed during ceremonies because they introduce non-native species or mess with the local chemistry. Imagine your magical day being interrupted by a guy in a flat-brimmed hat issuing a citation because your romantic aesthetic is technically a biological hazard. 7. In Saguaro National Park, the rangers have actually started embedding microchips into the cacti. This isn't a joke. It is highly illegal to move, damage, or interact aggressively with a saguaro. People were actually driving into the desert to kidnap these giant plants for their front yards, leading to a law that treats cactus theft like grand theft auto. These plants can live for 200 years. They've seen the rise and fall of empires, and they don't have time for your Pinterest-inspired landscaping projects. 8. You cannot use a drone in any national park. Period. The Federal Aviation Administration and the Park Service teamed up to ensure that the pristine silence of nature isn't ruined by the high-pitched buzz of a plastic quadcopter trying to get a 4K shot of a bear pooping. If you launch one, expect a ranger to appear out of the bushes like a woodland ninja to hand you a fine that costs more than the drone itself. Does anyone actually enjoy the sound of a giant mechanical mosquito while they're trying to meditate on a cliffside? 9. If you're hiking through the volcanic landscapes of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, do not, I repeat, do not, take a single piece of lava rock as a souvenir. While the Curse of Pele is a famous legend that claims bad luck follows anyone who steals volcanic stone, the federal government doesn't rely on superstitions. They rely on cold, hard fines. Taking a rock is a violation of the Theft of Government Property Act. Every year, the park receives hundreds of packages from guilty tourists mailing back stones because their lives fell apart after their vacation. Is a crusty black rock really worth the cosmic and legal headache? 10. There is a strictly enforced no naked hiking rule in almost every national park under public indecency laws. While becoming one with nature sounds poetic in a transcendentalist sort of way, the federal government prefers you do it with at least some synthetic fibers covering your sensitive bits. If you decide to go full naturalist on the Appalachian Trail, you're not a free spirit. You're a registered offender in the making. 11. In the backcountry of the Pacific Northwest, it is illegal to abandon a campfire before it is cold to the touch. This isn't just a safety tip, it's a law. Rangers will literally stick their bare hands, or a thermometer, into your ashes. If it's still warm, you get a ticket. The legal standard is that if you can't put your hand in it, you can't leave it. It turns the end of your night into a frantic, watery mess of mud and soot. Is there anything less majestic than spending 30 minutes pouring your entire water supply into a hole while shivering in the dark? 12. If you've ever felt the urge to recreate a scene from a fantasy novel by building a majestic stone cairn, those little stacks of balanced rocks, don't. In places like Acadia or Zion, unauthorized rock stacking is a legitimate crime. To you, it's a soulful expression of your journey. To a park ranger, it's a decorative form of vandalism that confuses hikers who use official trail markers and, more importantly, destroys the microscopic habitats of insects and lizards underneath. You are essentially evicting an entire family of salamanders just for a mediocre Instagram photo that's going to get 12 likes. Is your temporary artistic vision really worth destroying a creature's multi-generational family home? 13. At the Blue Ridge Parkway, it is strictly forbidden to pick more than a gallon of berries or nuts for personal consumption. This is one of those oddly specific laws that makes you wonder who the person was that showed up with a literal industrial-sized bucket and ruined it for everyone else. You can snack while you walk, but the moment you cross that 1-gallon threshold, you've transitioned from nature lover to unlicensed commercial harvester. The squirrels are already working overtime to prep for winter. They don't need you and your Tupperware collection coming in and creating a supply chain crisis in the local forest. 14. In certain high-altitude wilderness areas, the stay-on-the-trail rule is enforced with the intensity of a military blockade because of cryptobiotic soil. This isn't just dirt. It's a living crust of cyanobacteria, lichens, and mosses that takes decades to grow. One single footprint from your trendy hiking boots can crush a colony that's been thriving since the Cold War. The rangers will hunt you down for stepping off the path because, in their eyes, you've just committed a localized genocide against the planet's oldest biological crust. Honestly, how does it feel to know that your clumsy attempt at a shortcut just erased 50 years of botanical history in a single crunch? 15. If you're visiting the thermal pools at Yellowstone, there is a very literal no swimming rule that is backed by the threat of being boiled alive like a low-rent lobster. People constantly try to test the waters, ignoring the signs, only to realize these pools are essentially vats of concentrated acid and scalding geothermal water. It is a federal crime to even dip a toe in, mostly because the Park Service doesn't want to deal with the paperwork of your spontaneous dissolution. They aren't trying to gatekeep a natural spa day. They're trying to prevent you from becoming a permanent liquid part of the park's chemistry. 16. In the Great Smoky Mountains, it is illegal to use artificial light to view wildlife, a practice known as spotlighting. This means if you're driving through Cades Cove at night and decide to point a high-powered flashlight at a deer to see its eyes glow, you're breaking the law. It's considered unfair harassment because it freezes the animals in place, making them vulnerable and stressed. The law basically demands that if you want to see a bear in the dark, you have to do it the old-fashioned way, by stumbling over it in the pitch black and regretting every life choice that led you to that moment. 17. Believe it or not, it is illegal to possess or use a metal detector in almost every national park in the United States. The government's logic is that if you're looking for buried treasure, you're intending to dig, and if you're digging, you're destroying federal land. Even if you just want to find your lost car keys, having the device in your trunk can be enough to get you questioned. They treat treasure hunters like high-stakes international smugglers. Why is the government so terrified of a guy in cargo shorts finding a buffalo nickel from 1924? Are they hiding a secret underground civilization or just protecting their monopoly on old dirt? 18. In many parks, it is a crime to mimic animal sounds to attract wildlife. If you're that person who thinks they can do a convincing elk bugle or a wolf howl to get a better look at the pack, you are technically engaging in illegal wildlife baiting. You're confusing the animals, disrupting their mating rituals, and, let's be honest, you sound nothing like a wolf. You sound like a husky having a midlife crisis. The rangers want the wilderness to remain wild, which means your amateur impressions are officially banned from the forest stage. 19. If you're camping in a bear country zone, the clean camp rules are so strict they border on the obsessive. It's not just about locking up your food. In some areas, it is a finable offense to leave out smellables like toothpaste, deodorant, or even a dirty dishcloth. Bears have noses that can detect a stick of cherry chapstick from 3 miles away. If a ranger finds a single stray gum wrapper on your picnic table, they can hit you with a fine that would cover a stay at a 5-star hotel. It turns your relaxing weekend into a high-stakes game of don't let the apex predator smell my minty fresh breath. 20. In the Everglades, it is strictly illegal to harass an alligator by splashing the water or making loud noises to get it to move. These prehistoric suitcases have been lounging in the sun since the dawn of time, and the law protects their right to be lazy. If you try to poke one with a stick or throw a rock to see if it's real, you're looking at a massive fine and a potential encounter with a creature that doesn't understand the concept of a fair warning. The law is essentially there to protect you from your own stupidity, because the alligator certainly won't. 21. At the White Sands National Park, don't even think about bringing your favorite neon-colored sand toys or high-tech plastic sleds if they're going to leave a permanent mark. While sledding is surprisingly legal here, the no-trace laws are so aggressive that rangers have been known to stop people for using wax on their boards that isn't biodegradable. They treat a stray piece of paraffin like a toxic oil spill in the middle of a pristine white desert. It's a surreal sight. Federal agents essentially inspecting your plastic disc to ensure your downhill fun doesn't result in a chemical sand-tastrophe. 22. In certain Alaskan national parks, it is illegal to whisper in a way that might disturb a bear. Okay, that's a slight exaggeration of the harassment of wildlife statute, but the rule is, if your presence changes the animal's behavior, you're breaking the law. If you see a bear and start frantically whispering to your spouse to get the camera, and the bear looks up, you have technically interfered with a federal resident. It's the bear's house. You're just the uninvited guest who smells like beef jerky. 23. In some specialized quiet zones within Olympic National Park, it is technically illegal to use any mechanical device that produces a non-natural sound, including a simple wind-up alarm clock. This isn't just about loud music. It's about the 1 Square Inch of Silence project, which aims to preserve the last places on Earth free from human noise. If your gear squeaks too loudly or your digital watch beeps at 6 km, you're technically a sound polluter. 24. At Mount Rushmore, the rules regarding unauthorized climbing are understandably intense, but did you know it's also illegal to even possess climbing gear in certain restricted zones near the faces? You don't even have to be on the mountain. Just looking like you might try to scale Lincoln's nose is enough to get you detained. The security here is more Mission Impossible than Yogi Bear, with sensors and cameras everywhere. They've spent decades ensuring nobody gives Thomas Jefferson a mustache or a GoPro perspective, and they aren't about to let your epic stunt ruin the national monument. 25. In the backcountry of many Western parks, you are legally forbidden from washing yourself or your dishes within 200 feet of a natural water source. Even if you're using biodegradable soap, the law says you can't use it in the lake. You have to haul your water far away, do your scrubbing, and then dump the gray water into a hole. The logic? Biodegradable soap doesn't actually degrade in water. It needs a soil bacteria to break down. Without that, you're just making a giant foamy bubble bath for the local trout, which, shocker, is actually quite poisonous for them. 26. For the aspiring influencers out there, it is a federal crime to film a commercial video in a national park without a very expensive permit. If you have a professional-looking tripod and a high-end camera, rangers will treat you like a Hollywood director. Even if you're just a YouTuber with a decent setup, they might argue your content creation is a business. People have been slapped with thousands of dollars in fines just for filming a high-quality gear review. Is your top 10 tents video really worth a legal battle with the Department of the Interior over your lack of a cinematography license? 27. In Petrified Forest National Park, the no-touch rule for the ancient stone-turned-wood is so legendary that they literally search cars at the exit. They aren't looking for weapons. They are looking for stray wood. The park has a conscience pile near the entrance, a massive heap of petrified wood returned by tourists who couldn't handle the guilt of stealing a 200-million-year-old fossil. The law is so strict that even picking up a piece to look at it can get you a stern talking to from a guy with a badge and a very dry sense of humor. 28. In many parks, it is illegal to play a musical instrument or use a speaker if it can be heard from more than 50 feet away. This is officially known as an audio disturbance regulation. It exists because nobody hiked 6 miles into the backcountry to hear your questionable acoustic cover of Wonderwall or your Chill Vibes 2026 Spotify playlist. Nature has its own soundtrack, and the rangers are more than happy to fine you into silence. Honestly, shouldn't this rule apply to every public beach and subway car in the world? 29. In several national forests, there is a weirdly specific rule against occupying a campsite for more than 14 days in a 30-day period. This is to prevent people from homesteading, or essentially moving into the forest permanently. Even if you move your tent 10 feet to the left, the rangers see through your games. They track your license plate like a high-stakes casino security team. You can be the world's biggest nature lover, but after 2 weeks, the government decides you're officially a squatter and kicks you back to civilization. 30. In the deep backcountry of the High Sierras, it is illegal to use traditional lead fishing sinkers because if a loon or an eagle eats a lost one, they die of lead poisoning. The law requires you to use non-toxic alternatives like tungsten or tin. It's a noble rule, but it means a ranger can literally inspect your tackle box and fine you for having a tiny piece of metal that's been in your family's fishing kit since 1975. 31. At Crater Lake, the water is so famously pure that it is strictly illegal to use any watercraft other than the official park tour boats. No kayaks, no paddleboards, and definitely no floating on an inflatable unicorn for your TikTok. The law is designed to prevent invasive species from hitchhiking into the lake, but it effectively makes the deepest lake in America a look but don't touch zone for your own gear. If you even dip a private hull into those blue waters, you're looking at a federal citation faster than you can say hydrosanitation. 32. If you're visiting the Channel Islands, you are legally required to scrub the bottom of your shoes before stepping onto the islands. It's a biosecurity law meant to stop mainland seeds from colonizing the unique island ecosystem. Rangers treat a clump of dirt on your sneaker like a ticking biological bomb. You aren't just a hiker. You're a potential carrier of an ecological invasion. Honestly, does being treated like a high-risk pathogen carrier make your weekend getaway feel more like a top-secret scientific mission? 33. In Zion National Park, canyoneering requires a permit that is essentially a legal contract stating you know how not to die. But here's the kicker. It's illegal to use permanent hardware like bolts or anchors in the rock. You have to use natural anchors, meaning if you can't find a sturdy tree or a rock wedge, you're out of luck. The law prioritizes the unblemished look of the canyon over your personal sense of security. It turns your afternoon adventure into a high-stakes puzzle where the wrong answer involves a very long, very illegal fall. 34. At Sequoia National Park, don't think about pinecone collecting for your Christmas wreath. Taking a single cone from a giant sequoia is a federal offense. These aren't just decorations. They are the genetic blueprints for the largest trees on Earth. The Park Service views your craft project as a direct hit on the forest's future. If a ranger catches you with a trunk full of cones, they won't see a hobbyist. They'll see a botanical smuggler. Why is it that the government is more protective of a woody seed than most people are of their own Wi-Fi passwords? 35. In several Alaskan wilderness areas, it is illegal to disturb a nesting bird, and the definition of disturb is incredibly broad. If a bird flushes, meaning it flies away because you walked too close, you have technically broken federal law under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. You are expected to be a ghost in the woods. If your presence causes a single wing flap of annoyance, you're a criminal. How are you supposed to navigate a forest when every pigeon has the legal right to sue you for emotional distress? 36. At Arches National Park, it is strictly forbidden to walk under certain arches that are deemed unstable. While it seems like a suggestion for your safety, it's actually an enforceable rule to protect the formations from the vibrations of human footsteps. You can look at the 60-foot stone bridge, but if you step into the shadow of the danger zone, you're a trespasser. They've spent millions of years eroding. They don't need your boots speeding up the process. 37. In many national parks, including the heavy hitters like Yosemite, it is strictly illegal to feed the squirrels, but not just because of their health. It's because these tiny, fluffy sociopaths become food-conditioned, meaning they stop hunting and start mugging tourists for granola bars. The law technically classifies a squirrel biting you as a wildlife interaction, which sounds majestic until you're at the infirmary getting a rabies shot because you tried to share your trail mix with a creature that has the temperament of a caffeinated pirate. 38. At Carlsbad Caverns, it is a crime to touch a speleothem. That's a stalactite or stalagmite to us normal people. The oil from your skin permanently stops the growth of the crystal and stains it forever. It takes 1,000 years for an inch of growth and one poke from your greasy finger to ruin it. Rangers watch the formations like hawks. You're essentially walking through a multi-million-year-old art gallery where the security guards have the power to arrest you for smudging the statues. 39. If you're camping in a designated dark sky park, using a high-lumen white flashlight can actually get you a warning or a fine. These areas have lighting ordinances to protect the visibility of the Milky Way. You are often required to use red light filters to preserve night vision. If you turn on a massive LED floodlight to find your s'mores sticks, you're technically a light polluter. Is it weird that in the middle of the wilderness, the government has a say in what color your off switch should be? 40. In certain areas of the Grand Teton backcountry, it is illegal to cache or hide food for later pickup, even if it's in a bear-proof container. You must keep your gear with you at all times. The rule exists because abandoned gear attracts curious wildlife and creates trash in the eyes of the law. If you try to lighten your load by burying a stash of supplies, you're officially a litterer. The mountains demand you carry your burdens, both literal and metaphorical, without any shortcuts. 41. In the deep canyons of Glen Canyon, it is a crime to engage in unauthorized graffiti, but the definition includes even the most temporary marks. People have been fined for using mud to write their names on canyon walls, or even using a stick to draw in the silt of a riverbank. The Park Service views the visual landscape as a sacred, static document. If you leave a mark that wouldn't be there naturally, you've technically vandalized a billion years of geology. Why do we feel the need to scratch our names into rocks that were here before our ancestors even learned to walk? 42. If you're visiting the dry Tortugas, don't even think about magnet fishing. While it's a viral trend elsewhere, doing it in a national park is a massive legal no-no. They aren't worried about you catching a rusty bike. They're worried about you accidentally pulling up a live piece of unexploded ordnance from the fort's military history, or a priceless 17th century shipwreck artifact. The law basically says that if it's underwater and metallic, it belongs to the government, and your super magnet is essentially a burglary tool. 43. At Badlands National Park, the no off-roading rule applies to more than just cars. It applies to your bicycles, too. You are legally restricted to designated pavement or dirt roads only. If you try to take your mountain bike across the grassy buttes to get that perfect sunset shot, you are a federal violator. The soil there is so prone to erosion that a single tire track can turn into a massive gully after one rainstorm. Does it feel a bit ironic that in a place called the Badlands, the rules are so incredibly sensitive? 44. In many parks, it is illegal to commercialize your campsite by subletting it or charging people to join you. Believe it or not, people have tried to run Airbnb experiences out of their tents on federal land. The rangers will shut that down faster than a collapsing pop-up tent. Your permit is non-transferable and strictly for personal use. If you try to turn your $30 campsite into a $200 glamping retreat for strangers, you're looking at a fine and an immediate eviction from the woods. 45. At Yellowstone, there is a very specific regulation against disturbing the bacterial mats near the geysers. These colorful orange and green slicks are actually trillions of extremophile bacteria. Stepping on them isn't just dangerous for you, it's a federal crime because you're destroying a biological laboratory that NASA literally uses to study potential life on other planets. You aren't just stepping on slime, you're stomping on an alien analog ecosystem. How does it feel to know your hiking boot is a weapon of mass destruction for an entire microscopic civilization? 46. In Death Valley, there is a surprisingly strict and somewhat hilarious prohibition against sledding on the famous sand dunes using anything other than your own 2 feet. This means your dreams of sandboarding down a 700-foot peak of scorching silica are officially dead on arrival. The National Park Service claims it's to protect the delicate geological structure of the dunes. But we all know the truth. They just don't want to spend their entire Saturday helicoptering out tourists who thought they were Tony Hawk, but realized halfway down that sand is significantly less forgiving than a half-pipe. If you're caught sliding down on a cardboard box or a stray plastic lid, you aren't just a rebel. You're a federal offender with a very sandy backside and a very expensive ticket to pay. 47. At Great Sand Dunes, it is a crime to possess or use glass containers on the dunes themselves. The logic is simple. Broken glass and shifting sand is a permanent, invisible hazard for every barefoot hiker for the next 100 years. If a ranger sees you with a glass soda bottle, they won't just ask you to put it away. They'll write a citation that costs more than a crate of the stuff. It's one of the few rules that everyone actually agrees with, yet people still try to sneak them in for the aesthetic. 48. In many national parks, geocaching, the global scavenger hunt using GPS, is strictly forbidden. While it seems like harmless fun, the government views it as abandoned property and a distraction that leads people off-trail into dangerous or sensitive areas. If you hide a box in a national park, you are technically a litterer in the eyes of federal law. They don't want you hunting for plastic trinkets. They want you looking at the trees. Why is the government so determined to stop us from playing the world's most nerdy game of hide-and-seek? 49. If you find a dropped set of elk or deer antlers in a national park, it is a federal crime to take them home. These are called sheds, and in the park's eyes, they are a vital source of calcium for rodents and soil nutrients. Taking them is removal of natural resources. You might see a $200 wall decoration. The ranger sees a rodent's dinner and a violation of the Code of Federal Regulations. All right, we've covered 49 points and only one remains. But first, the final verdict. The award for the most absurdly bureaucratic rule goes to rule number 12, the felony of rock stacking. It's the peak of national park logic, where balancing 3 stones for a photo makes you a federal vandal on par with a graffiti artist. While meant to protect bugs, it's the ultimate example of how a harmless childhood whim can trigger a legal nightmare. Do you agree that decorative rock balancing is a crime, or has the government gone too far? Tell us below. Now, our final number. 50. In many national parks, it is technically illegal to fail to follow the instructions of a park ranger, even if those instructions seem arbitrary or weird. If a ranger tells you to stop wearing a specific hat because it's distracting the mountain goats and you refuse, you can be charged with interfering with a government employee. This catch-all rule gives them immense power. Essentially, the ranger's word is the ultimate law of the land. It's a reminder that when you step into a national park, you're stepping out of the standard world and into a place where the guy in the green hat is the king, the judge, and the jury. From thermal hot dog cooking to the federal crime of picking up a pine cone, the great outdoors is governed by a web of rules that would make a librarian dizzy. But behind the absurdity, these laws exist to keep these wild places from turning into a chaotic free-for-all. Have you ever been stopped or fined by a park ranger for something you thought was totally normal? Share your wildest run-in with the law in the forest below. Hit that like button and subscribe, or a ranger might find a reason to cite you for that too.